holding these town halls in red districts across the country. You're saying Democrats need to do a better job of reaching Trump voters. I want to play something you said at an event in Texas last month.
We let them define the issue on immigration. We let them define the issue on DEI, and we let them define what woke is. We got ourselves in this mess because we weren't bold enough to stand up and say, you damn right we're proud of these policies. We're going to put them in, and we're going to execute them.
I mean, the issues you identified there were immigration, right, DEI, and woke. You think Democrats' problem was that you just didn't do a good enough job explaining the policies, and not that voters simply didn't just reject what you were selling, particularly on immigration, I wonder?
No, on immigration, what we were asking for is a bipartisan policy that strengthens immigration control, that recognizes that we need a workforce here, that they should be allowed here legally, and that when they get here, they're part of the American fabric. And that is the bipartisan bill we had. Donald Trump snatching up college grad students and sending them back, or sending folks to El Salvador illegally, that's not the policy. But for us to say, we don't care that violent criminals come in, we most certainly do. What we were asking for is the resources to make sure they don't get here. And the same thing with the other policies. It's not a woke policy to provide food for children to get breakfast and lunch, and we get better outcomes from that. They defined things on their terms that weren't true. And what I'm saying is, are we going to turn away from being a country of legal immigration? Are we going to turn away from a country that thinks diversity and making sure that we don't have gaps in income between blacks and whites? Those are policies that have strengthened America. And I think what we allowed ourselves to do is we got timid. And then when we got power, we didn't pass things that improved people's lives. This whole idea, I think the Democratic Party gets theoretical, talk about food insecurity. People are hungry, get them food. People don't have a house. Make sure they have a living wage. That's the point that I'm saying is, Fox News will glorify, oh, he's for DEI. Not your definition of DEI. My definition is rule of law that's fair, that everybody gets an opportunity. And that's the point I think we have to make. Now, look, I'll be the first to tell you, Jake, I'm out here doing what I can do. I don't know if I'm the best spokesperson to do it after just losing an election. But what I know is the public, and you saw it across the country this weekend, they're rising up and asking their leadership to do something.
So we heard your former running mate Kamala Harris say she's not here to say I told you so, although obviously that's what she was saying about all the Trump chaos. We're saying, I have to say, though, what does I told you so really mean here? I mean, people heard her message. They did not vote for her. She lost every battleground state. You yourself have criticized the Harris-Walz campaign for being too cautious. She may have told the American people, she may have warned the American people, but she didn't do it compellingly enough to win.
That is the absolute point. And look, when I criticize, I'm criticizing myself. I own this. I'm part of the ticket. And somebody has to come up with a strategy. I think this is exactly right. This is the thing. Look, Democrats, it was a good night in Wisconsin. I was over there. We saw that happen. Donald Trump's doing this. Just to be clear, nobody on the Democratic side is celebrating this, and those folks in the street are not celebrating that Donald Trump's making all these errors. I think what the vice president's saying is that was pretty self-evident that he was going to do that. I do think the challenge for Democrats, and this is, I think, a structural problem that's going to take a lot more thinking, why, with all of that out there, did they not think we were any better than that? And they didn't. And I'm very concerned with the folks who stayed home. And these are folks that I'll say once again, Donald Trump has identified their angst. They can't buy a house. They can't afford to get a good education. They're concerned that their economic future is so precarious it could slip out from under them. Less than half of Americans have $1,000 in savings. And I think, why was it not so compelling? It should have been a slam dunk for us to say, we're the party that cares about that. We're the party that's going to protect Social Security and Medicare. We're the party that thinks the ACA is a good start, but we need to do more on health care. And we didn't do that. So I'm concerned. Democrats do well in special elections and off-year elections, but the electorate that comes in presidential election years is different. When I was young, it was easy to know what a Democrat was. They stood with the working class and labor. Republicans were country club and for the rich. Today, you ask people, they don't. We have a 29% approval rating.
Yeah.
It doesn't help us any that Donald Trump ends up with a 25% approval rating. We have to get back to the core issues, that this is about making America prosperous and stable and innovative for everybody.
Well, what do you make of the criticism that one of the reasons why your party was so resoundingly rejected last November is because Democrats were gaslighting the country, saying that inflation was not a big deal, heralding Bidenomics. Not only Biden, but Kamala Harris was heralding Bidenomics, pretending that there wasn't a problem at the border. And then fundamentally, this idea that President Biden was up for another 4 years of the job, while Americans in poll after poll for year after year were saying he's too old to do the job. Your party stood against all of those things.
Look, Joe Biden coming in and doing COVID and being a governor through COVID did a hell of a job. But I think one of the things that we didn't do is we assumed that we said, and it was true, that we were going to have a soft landing and our economy was better than the rest of the world. Better for who? Better for the working class who was saying groceries were too expensive, as they are now and going up. They got to see us talk about things. Again, I go back to this. Don't talk about food insecurity or housing type of issues. Talk about people being hungry and wondering where they're going to live, or about their children's future, about real security. And so I think your question is spot on. I think we got intellectualized on this. I think the fact of the matter is Joe Biden did soft land the economy. He did usher us through COVID. None of us are saying we should be soft on the border, but we allow a vacuum, and Donald Trump fills it, the 800-pound gorilla, and their narrative starts to stick, and we look weak. We look weak like we don't care. We look like look, Jake, I'm not going to say, we need to do is we need to just arrest people and ship them to El Salvador. No, we need to invest the money on border. We need to make sure that we have the judges necessary to adjudicate things faster. We need to make sure if you're going to be in this country here legally, and when you are, you're going to be uplifted, celebrated, and part of this great American tapestry. We didn't do that, and then it fills them. They'll find the example that is horrific where you have someone who's not here legally and they commit a crime. That is horrific, but we don't do a good job of telling that.
Don't you think your party needs to acknowledge that President Biden was not up for the job of running for re-election and that this was a major mistake by the
He made that decision.
I know, but you all went along with the idea that he was up for it, and he wasn't. And everybody saw it, and the country rejected it.
Yeah, well, look, history will tell us to go back on that. That very well could be the case, Jake. What I'm concerned about is learning from those lessons. I would hope we would never do it again, make a mistake, make sure we go through and get someone. But I don't know where it helps us going forward. I certainly am deeply concerned that Donald Trump is going to lead us down a horrific look. Thank God it's tariffs that he said. Donald Trump listens to no one. Remember, Donald Trump has statements about, I don't think nuclear war would be that bad. I guess we're lucky that he went after tariffs instead of that route. Yeah. We have an issue in this country that is going to impact us. And if there is not a loyal opposition, if there's not some soul searching on our side, if there's not reaching out to those folks who are in the streets, they're leading right now.
So quick question.
I would tell everybody, you better get with them. Yeah.
Quick question, because we got to go. But you said you're not going to run for the Senate seat there. Are you going to run for a third term for governor? Are you possibly going to run for president in 2028?
Well, I'm certainly thinking about running again in Minnesota if that's what they want. I am not thinking about running in 2028. And my advice to folks is if in this moment you're planning for 2028, you're going to get rolled by the people in the streets. You just need to be out there making sure you're helping and doing things like Cory Booker's doing things like Bernie Sanders, AOC, things that we see people out talking to folks. So for me, I'm going to get through this legislative session. If the folks in Minnesota want me, I'm kind of inclined to do that. And I just want to play my part to make sure we cannot afford to allow Donald Trump or his successor to go forward, because you're seeing the pain.
Good to have you back here, Governor Walz. Oh, and happy birthday. 61 years young today. Congratulations.
61. Thanks so much.
Good to see you. How worried are Republicans getting about President Trump's trade war? Well, I'm going to ask one on my panel next.